Thanks so much. I feel like expert is going to be a tough term to live up to after the day or two that we've had. Thanks for having me. It's been a great conference so far. I'm super excited. I mean, being surrounded by this much passion for brand and what loyalty in a brand can do, it's a world I live day in and day out, and it's nice to kind of be among kindred spirits of that sort. A little bit about Bond. Bond is sort of a strange brew, I would say. When we think of it in loyalty terms, we think of it in cult terms. We've got a lot of clients that we've had for a long, long time. Loyalty is sort of this strange thing that doesn't get self-promoted all that often. There's still some secret sauce to it. A lot of our clients don't tend to want to talk publicly about the inner workings and the mechanics of the way that they run this part of their brand, this part of their marketing mix. We are almost 400 people, and we are, as Chris mentioned, mostly in Toronto, a little bit in New York, Minneapolis, and St. Louis. And what I wanted to do today was maybe continue that line of dialogue around the evolution of loyalty. I would contend loyalty to some degree has a bit of a brand problem. That word in and of itself kind of gets interpreted in a lot of different ways. I'll walk through these three and probably want to spend most of our time on the third one. We use the framework or the terminology big L loyalty to sort of name the thing, the program. The creative in me is like, that's a noun. That's what that is. Different from small L loyalty, the sentiment or the outcome, the human behavior that is dedication and commitment to something, to a brand in our case. And that third one, the alternative kind of to either of those, has some interesting things on it. So Bond would be most known in Canada for running programs like the Scene loyalty program with Cineplex and Scotiabank. We ran for a long time. A great portion of Aeroplan, a best customer program for Home Depot. We've designed programs a lot in the last few years across the United States in brands that range a spectrum from Payless through to Staples, Office Depot, which I suppose may be called Staple Depot soon. And I think that this last term, this last version of loyalty, is the one that holds the most promise for us, and it's probably the one that I'll want to spend most of our time talking about this afternoon. Thanks for choosing to share your afternoon. I'll do a little introduction, but I'll be quick because there's a very large man who follows me on this stage afterwards, and the contrast of that should be quite entertaining. A little context for where I come at the topic of loyalty from. So I spent most of my career in youth marketing for endemic brands in youth culture. So the guys at Vice and a lot of that sort of trajectory for them, we lived on the ground with a lot of brands that they were involved with at that stage. And I think it's sort of a context setting for the way that loyalty has been evolving. A lot of loyalty marketers that we tend to greet, they came out of direct marketing of some sort. Maybe catalog is a history of theirs. This lens for us out of youth marketing, this one for me in particular, has been interesting because I often found in youth marketing that we had just gargantuan brands spending a lot of money to attract young people into their brand, and then they kind of back then just dumped them into the databases with their parents and their teachers, and I don't know that they got treated differently all the way along. And these should be like new customers who've got the longest life with you. These should be the most valuable customers that you have. And I always felt like, I'm not sure we're getting the full picture here. And so loyalty started to get an attractive kind of proposition for me. I often spent my time saying, WTF. I'm also glad, by the way, that following Vice, I won't be the guy who drops the most F-bombs. I often was sort of scratching my head and saying, this doesn't seem right. And I've been spending probably the last 7 years of my career unbundling the mechanics of loyalty and trying to understand what's behind Canadians' insatiable desire for loyalty programs of any and all color, stripe, shape. And I think it caused me to have to kind of relearn the 4 Ps of loyalty marketing. And this is largely how I spend a lot of the conversations that I have with great brands, beloved brands. One is navigating the politics. Who owns this thing? Is it the topic of loyalty that is owned in a particular place? Is it the loyalty program? Where does that sit? Is that a operational thing? It's sort of the dirty discount sales program we do off to the side? Or is it something else? And so a lot of the conversation tends to be, who has ownership of this? Who is tasked with building this and having this outcome in the organizations of the brands that we work with? Secondly, we spend a lot of time in pro formas. Literally, I take a lot of pride in this as a guy who came out of art school. A 5-year pro forma that shows you unequivocally how the thing will not only pay back, when it will break even, and how much lift, entirely incremental, not incidental lift, you're going to see out of this kind of marketing activity, takes this form of marketing out of a cost center scenario and puts it in a profit center scenario. And it's just a very different orientation to conducting marketing, so I've enjoyed that a lot. Invariably, there's a lot of debate about points or no points. How exhausted are people with these kinds of programs and those structures? The answer is not a one-size-fits-all. It is very dependent on where the brand is in their trajectory, and it kind of leads to this fourth one. What's the point? What is the point of loyalty in this brand? Does it play in the strategy of the brand at all, or is it just kind of an adjunct thing off to the side? And I think that that has always kind of caused me to wonder, like, why do this work? Of all the marketing work, I spent a lot of time in advertising, experiential, lots of digital stuff, and I thought, why do this work? Why does the world need more loyalty? Not maybe loyalty programs, but maybe for the right brands in the right context. Why does the world need more loyalty? What's going on in the world that makes people want to cling to this notion? I value loyalty in my personal life and in my professional life, and it seems to have translated into my commercial relationship with brands, to my less than commercial, or let's call it very upstream of purchase, demonstrations of loyalty that I have to a brand. And so I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about what's going on in the world that's making loyalty, in whatever form we want to talk about, the right answer. The story starts here with kind of one of the most favorite, he admitted reluctantly, but odd fashion trends that I've seen in the last few years, where literally standing out and blending in at the same time has become this crazy ubiquitous thing. I feel like I saw it once, and then all of a sudden it was everywhere. And then it was gone again, because the pace of the way that we handle fashion, entire brands, H&M and Zara have built an industry on sort of subsuming themselves. Before that trend gets to the end of the runway, people are moving on to the next thing. And all of that stuff is happening at quicker and quicker paces. I don't even update this slide anymore, because I feel like in the last 15 minutes, it's probably out of date. I don't know how many models now. I'm not sure any of the sites that I keep checking to get the exact count over this period of time are true. But tech in general had this sort of built-in buyer's remorse. Every time I bought a device, like 15 minutes later, I was like, oh, could have had more storage or better features or this thing or that thing. And I think this pace of change is also a little unsettling for people. I think that unsettledness translates into a bunch of different areas of life that we deal with today. Air travel seems riskier, and all the stats would say no, but all the coverage would say, kind of. The things go missing. What do you mean missing? It's 2015. We don't know where everything is at every moment on the planet. Are you kidding? I was promised a jetpack like so long ago, and we don't even know where stuff is in the air. I've been shocked by this, and some of that stuff, again, it just kind of adds to that unsettled feeling. Hacks are kind of a regular occurrence if you're retailers. They hurt a lot. Neiman Marcus, a Target, these are big brand events for you that you then have to contend with thereafter for quite a bit of time. No stranger in gaming. Hacks have made their way into Hollywood, and the hackers win-ish, depending on how you looked at the way that situation was handled. This guy can get into your iCloud and take the compromising photos, if you're a celebrity, off of your iPhone. And I think that, again, is just adding to this level of unsure, unsettled kind of orientation developing in the world. I found this one really hard. Like, David Letterman had an affair and went public with it on the air. Tiger Woods, same kind of thing. Lance Armstrong was like, oh, God. These ones I found really sort of unsettling. These are personalities. One, a father figure, kind of one of the quintessential archetype father figures in pop culture. Turns out in his personal behaviors, I don't know, maybe things weren't as they seemed. The Canadian, I don't know that I would call it an equivalent, different kind of persona, but an authority in the media who ended up in your living room on a regular basis or in your ear on a regular basis. And I think that those things, again, just unsettle people. The constant sort of coverage of every new threat of disease, SARS, H1N1, mumps in the NHL, all of these things just get so much amplification and so much coverage, and it feels like it just unsettles us. How many more countries are going to threaten to file for bankruptcy or actually file for bankruptcy and call back relief on their loans, et cetera? And so in all these categories of life, we've nicknamed the threat levels. They've either got colors or they've got nicknames. We're so trained to this unsettled kind of behavior and cues all around us. It starts making me think about loyalty as a bit of an antidote to that. The fictional characters that I find in pop culture that we want to fall back to. We want to look back at a simpler time. It's not the glorification of advertising that I find so fascinating. It's the way that those things seem more familiar somehow. I never lived that world. That shouldn't be familiar to me. But somehow it does, and I look back at it fondly. I think about, anybody watch this show? The Newsroom? Probably one of my favorite shows. Here he's sort of framed inside the shoulders of Cronkite as like a modern-day incarnation of the archetype that Walter Cronkite was. And I think there's a familiarity and a stability in that. And they're sort of, it's an interesting one. They're melding kind of current day events and this noble sort of cause, a thing you want to believe in that feels more familiar and more dependable. The modern nostalgia of the invention of the personal computer. Again, we look back fondly as a form of familiarity and dependability. I like this one. I mean, even the success of TV fall lineups or huge major blockbuster titles going into market, there are familiar characters and storylines. There are dependable outcomes. There are clearer good guys and bad guys. Even these two kind of feel like a good guy and a bad guy facing off in this particular battle. And I think all of that sort of brings me back to, and it's maybe fitting we're in a setting like this where I think we're starved as human beings for authenticity. We want it in a lot of forms. We want to be able to depend on stuff. We want to be able to expect reciprocity. We want to be able to live a life that has more predictable outcomes. And think about that from a business perspective. I mean, predictable outcomes as a result of loyal behaviors by your customers are things you can take to the bank. They're things you talk to the street about. And so I think I look around in a lot of ways, and it feels like we've gotten really good at fabricating authenticity, by the way. But I think that's because we're so starved for it. And I think all of that's important because it feels like a version of, I'll say, my grandfather's brand of loyalty. It was honest and it was hardworking. I had two grandfathers. One was a butcher. One was a tailor, highly personal businesses. People came in regularly. You were sort of stitched into the fabric of families. That brand of loyalty is attractive. It built countries. It started industrial revolutions. It put a man on the moon because this guy said he would. He made a promise, and they did it. And I think we look back at these things as forms of familiarity and dependability. So when I talk about the word loyalty up front, I always try and kind of get away from that word for all of its different interpretations. All of the sort of recent interpretations in a marketing context would be loyalty program and all of the mechanics that comes with that. Loyalness, sort of the act of being loyal to something, this is something that can provide resilience for a brand. We're inevitably going to screw things up as brands. Having some forgiveness built into your customer base to allow for that, to make them not so attracted to that offer next door from a competing brand. I won't do this now. If you find me later, preferably at the bar, I would love to tell you a story about the legend of the gold watch and the beginnings of that as a sort of symbol of loyalty and commitment and how it relates to the beginnings of our agency 100 and I want to say 19 years ago. But instead, I wanted to think about the brands. We're blessed to do a lot of great work for a lot of different kinds of brands at different stages of their maturity or challenge. Some of it's formal loyalty. Some of it is program-based formal loyalty. Some of it is less formal. Some of it is, I would argue, almost loyalty engineering, stitching brand and loyalty together, baking loyalty right into the fabric of the way the business operates. It's part of the product. It's not just sort of an adjacent thing on the side. And I think that alternate view, it's got pieces of the mechanical elements in Big L loyalty in programs. There are dynamics there that work, founded in human science that we understand very well. And then there's some stuff in the sentiment of loyalty that feels like it's been missing. From a brand building perspective, the emotional parts of loyalty is what we often are talking to clients these days about, building into the fabrics of their brands. This is the distinction I would want you to hold on to. There is a difference between being a loyalty brand and being a brand who happens to have a loyalty program. One is literally stitched in to as many parts of the way the business operates, and the other is a mechanism, a useful mechanism for the right brand in the right context. Here's a tangible set of examples, and not because Disney is here today, but these guys make a wicked promise. Literally, we are going to make magic, and we're going to make it so dependably that signatures, no matter which Disney property you go to, that princess's signature is a perfect facsimile from property to property to property. There's no variation. So if one kid comes back from some other destination with that signature, there isn't any variation that begs the question about the magic. There's some loyalty mechanics in there. They have spent somewhere, I want to say, upwards of 7 or 8 years perfecting the way to uniquely identify individual guests, to understand every point of interaction. I mean, the thing is manufactured overseas. It's got a battery that'll go dormant for 7 years between your visits. Probably one of the best CRM engines for anniversaries and birthdays on the planet, bar none. And I think there's some interesting loyalty mechanics baked in to their brand. It's not a program. It doesn't present itself as a program. I think the same is true of Netflix on their personalization engine, which is, I would say, the second major key ingredient of good loyalty. That the content you are serving to people is auto-relevant because it's been based off of an activity that they did or didn't do. Not the thing you want to say, but the thing that they cued you to be able to talk about. I know Apple is like a perpetual example at marketing conferences. I'm not talking about Apple. I'm just talking about Genius, the Genius bar, and probably your Apple ID iTunes login. Those three ingredients are loyalty. I love going into an Apple store and seeing the back of that store might as well be a Starwood preferred guest concierge check-in. It might as well have a carpet and 2 stanchions just for our people over here. Thank you. You go left, you go right. If you've bought something, you're one of us, and we're happy to help you. We'll provide this service as a benefit for being one of us, for being loyal, for being a customer, not a tourist, not a window shopper, but one of us. Here's the one I want to really unbundle. Full disclosure, we don't do work for Nest. I look at what Nest does, what Nest has done to their business as they've developed over time, and I feel like this is one of the best examples of baking loyalty into the brand and into the fabric of the business. Everyone familiar with Nest? The learning thermostat. So these guys took probably one of the most innocuous pieces of electronics in your house, and they said, we're going to make it smart and sexy and useful. It'll save you money. It'll cost you more up front. This is not a Honeywell little white plastic thing that's going to go on your wall. This thing is like machined aluminum and stainless steel, a lot of electronics. It hooks up to your Wi-Fi. The basic proposition is you turn it left when you want it less hot or cold, you turn it right when you want it more hot or cold, and it learns your patterns. No programming schedules. You can do that if you want to, but it'll just learn from your little left and right cues how you like the temperature, when you like the temperature that way. It's got all the markings of, let's call it the loyalty mechanics that you would bake into a loyalty program. In a loyalty program, this looks like a card or some other token that gets swiped or scanned at cash. This one is a personal identifier for you. It also happens to make the email address part of the personal identifier, so it automatically gets a conduit for communication downstream. And then it goes even further. It gives each of your products its own ID. And at first, when I just bought the thermostat, much to the chagrin of my partner, who was like, you spent $250 on a what? I punched in this number on the back of it, and I thought, why do they need that? I have one house. I need one thermostat. How are these guys gonna, like, why do they need this thing? How are they gonna sell me anything else? How am I gonna be a loyal customer to this sort of brand? We'll come back to that in a second. They did a great job of building the unique identifier right into the way you use the product and at a product level, which is like unheard of. They send a set of personalized communications, which I would say in and of itself, you know, we probably all feel like if we've got experience with database marketing of any sort, that there's some level of personalization that's going on there. I'm not talking, hi, Sean, comma, here's your points balance. I'm talking about things that are more relevant, things that stitch me into a community. Look at what we've done together. 224 billion kilowatt hours saved by all Nesters, and they have a nickname like any good brand community would. We've accumulated that kind of benefit to the world with the purpose that they've declared, which is to use our energy more wisely. You for your house, us for the world and the planet. I get my own progress bar to say, how did I do this month versus last month? I'm doing better or worse. I'm doing better or worse? I'm getting communication from my thermostat. I have an email relationship in the intimacy of my inbox with my thermostat. And then the in-app notifications are like helpful tips. It's time to change the air filter. It's time for you to change the battery in the smoke detector. The smoke detector, I'll come back to in a second. It's very secret sauce there. It's got a currency, like any loyalty program would. I can't spend leafs. Every time I turn the heat down just enough, it gives me the little leaf. And I kind of go, yeah, I did a good job. I just saved the planet a little bit. I earned myself a leaf. What can I do with a leaf? I can't do anything with a leaf. But it's a currency. Counts them up. Every month I get a thing that says, you got 4 more than last month, you've got 29. I've got 29 leaves. Yeah, take that to the bank. And it's a really easy learning mechanic, earning mechanic, rather. I know how to earn leaves. I just don't keep it as hot or don't keep it as cold in the summer. These are like familiar words to loyalty programs. They recognize me. It's a recognition program. I'm in the top 5% of nesters. Good for me. Just reflected to me in my inbox, nowhere else. There's a lot of co-creation. I can do stuff with my nest now. I feel like I'm part of the recipes on if this and then that. And so I've got more engagement with this thing. I'm playing with my thermostat. I'm baking recipes on my thermostat. And this last one is probably the most interesting. So I was like, why am I earning all these leaves? I can't do anything with them. One of the hardest things to swallow for a brand thinking about a formal loyalty program can be the liability that you carry when you create a currency. It does have some monetary value. These guys decided to take all those leaves you already earned, which weren't worth anything, and tell you they're now worth something, but they've offloaded the cost to power companies, to energy companies. So if I elect to let the nest change my temperature for me, knowing my preferences, it'll say everybody gets home at 5 o'clock, they hike up the air conditioning in the summer, brownouts. We don't have enough power to do that. So if just let it load balance the demand for power a couple hours early, and every one of the leafs I earn in doing so, power companies actually going to give me a rebate on my bill. They're going to give me a monetary value for those leafs. Nest doesn't carry the liability. It's beautiful. No CFO involvement in the rush hour rewards decision for Nest. And I think that stuff is very, very interesting. So again, full disclosure, I don't work for Nest. We don't do any work or consulting for them. But I think these are the mechanics that have been learned out of formal loyalty programs that can be applied directly into the brand, into the way the product works, into the fabric of how your business makes money. And I think that stuff is what's super fascinating by making loyalty a brand builder for so many companies. They've got, I think, another good strategy at play. Lots of brands work with Nest. If I owned a Mercedes, when I leave work, it fires a note home to my Nest that says he's coming home, heat it up or cool it down or whatever time of the year it is. I think that they've been very strategic in the way that they created these partnerships. The thing you are loyal to is your home and your family, probably above a lot of other things. And they basically said, so we're going to take that big asset purchase, we're going to build loyalty into the products and the brand around that thing you're already kind of loyal to. Second major asset purchase in a lifetime usually is a vehicle. Those are going to be our first partners. And they went, here are the traditional ones, and here's the new ones, automatic. Sort of plugs into the data port of any vehicle and can do a lot of other things. So I think they're spanning kind of the emotional loyalty triggers you already innately, naturally have, but they're funneling them into the Nest brand. I automatically care about that. So here's what I'd leave you with. The sort of next generation of loyalty, I don't know that I want to call it 3.0. It feels kind of too linear in the progression, 2.0, 3.0. But I would say it is a different paradigm that grabs some of the best things out of the previous two iterations and then just kind of puts things on their ear a little bit. Brand loyalty, loyalty stitched into the brand, engineered into the brand, can provide resilience, can keep perpetual behaviors, dependable behaviors that you can take to the bank, that you can build a business off of. And it creates an evangelism, an advocacy that is probably a way better source of acquisition, not probably. If I turn to you and I say, here's what it is, here's what I love about it, you should try it, creative guy, hand up. I can't write anything in art and copy that's more meaningful than one friend turning to another to say that. And I think advocacy as the form of acquisition holds a very interesting proposition for repatriating the money that currently goes into a lot of mass acquisition vehicles today. So that said, when I think about a world more loyal, it is one that has more dependable outcomes, that is more familiar, that feels a bit more like the sort of shopkeeper, general store purveyor. We're trying to take these big, great, gargantuan, beautiful brands that we've built and make them feel like they're more human, more relatable, more local. And I think that when we say our purpose is to create a more loyal world for the brands that we do business for, that's what we mean. Those are the qualities that we bring to the entire spectrum of formal loyalty through sort of loyalty engineering.